Hey, welcome. My name is Tom Russell. I'm your host for Life Without Limits, and I want to thank all of you for coming on to my show tonight. It's really cool. I've been blessed to share stories of victory and resilience from people all over the world, and this story that this guest that we have tonight is no different. In fact, he inspires me every time I think about him because of the challenges he's gone through and the victories he's come up with. And it's going to be truly impressive when we talk to my guest James Bailey. He's from oh my word, Sussex, England. So I got that right. Is that right, James?
Uh, Essex, but yeah.
What, Essex?
Essex is fine.
Oh, holy cow. Okay, you can tell I've never been to England. So in order for me to bring these type of shows, it takes a lot of work, just like anything. It takes research and contacting potential guests and seeking sponsors and doing the pre-interviews. I've done it with James. But the thing is, it's not a job for me. It's my life's work. I've been doing this show for over 2 years now, and I look forward to it every single Monday. And I think I get just as much inspiration from my guests as you do. But you know what? Here's the rub. It's uncomfortable to bring this up. In order for this show to happen, it requires some funding to produce. So if you like what you hear or like what you watch on YouTube, and you feel it's some value to you, if you'd like to help fund my show, you can do it so by being a sponsor of my show, where I could help your business get exposure to hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. Or you can go to my website, lifewithoutlimitsshow.com, and become a fan through my 3 tiers of support. You can get a digital copy of my first book, and I'll show you right here. I can get it here. It's Finding Your True North, A Bullied Teen's Journey of Hope. And the second book is Nowhere Man. It's about homelessness. Or you can get my 3rd tier and get my book and get this cool Life Without Limits T-shirt and move on with this. Now, this has been a labor of love, folks. So, in order to keep my show going, any support would be appreciated. So you can go to my website again, to lifewithoutlimitsshow.com. Now that I was able to talk about that, I want to talk about what we're going to be discussing tonight. Now, over the years, I've experienced some traumas to my body that affected how I live. I had a broken thumb, a torn hamstring, a torn meniscus, having a screw embedded in my wrist, and a hernia, an infected gallbladder that had to be removed because it looked like a cesspool. I had a bike accident where I crashed into a parked truck head on. I had a herniated disc. That was the most painful experience I've ever had. But here's the thing. Eventually, I recovered from all those experiences. And it was just a short-term blip in my life. And I sometimes forget how blessed I am to be relatively healthy at age 59. And whenever I feel like I want to feel sorry for myself with a certain ailment or injury, I often think about, those people who have experienced trauma to their body every single day of their life. And someone who's paralyzed from a tragic car accident, or someone who has muscular dystrophy, robbing them from their motor skills that we all take for granted. And the simple act of hearing or speaking or depression is so bad you contemplate taking your life every single day. And there's so many others. I don't have time to tell you, but the point is, I feel I should be blessed for how I am, and trust me, I do. So when I found out about James, I had to marvel at his persistent, heroic fight to live and lead a normal life. He's got epilepsy, and that's somebody nobody wants to experience. And I personally witnessed it with my cousin Kurt when he was a younger child. He had epileptic seizures, and I watch him, his body shaking and seizing up, and you just had to sit there and write it out with him, and it was tough to watch. But through medication, Kurt's quite a bit older now, but he's managed to keep his epilepsy under control. And of course, like I said, my guest tonight, James Bailey, he has epilepsy, and through the course of his young life, He has daily seizures, up to 100 to 200 a day. He's only 28. And from what James had told me, he's estimated he's experienced almost 500,000 seizures in his young life. And I mean, that has to be demoralizing, and I can't even imagine what it's like. But, if those are people who've listened to my show or watched my show on YouTube, my show is never about defeat. It's always about victory. And James is the poster child of victory. And it's been challenging for him. It's been a life of challenges. But when you hear a story of resilience amidst all those challenging circumstances, you're going to come away tonight appreciating how precious life is. And you're going to know what it's like for one individual to look at life through a different lens on a daily basis. And you're going to find a way to inspire others because of his courage and his will to be a normal person, whatever normal means to anybody. And what's nice about this show today is there's more that we have to talk about. There's no way that I can encapsulate his story on one show. So we've decided to have James on another night. So we're going to be able to give him the voice he needs to explain his life. So I want you to sit back, folks, and I want you to marvel at this young man. James, thank you so much. I am so blessed and honored and privileged to have you on my show today.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for those kind words. Yeah, it's always get emotional over it.
Yeah. And I mean it. I really mean it, because we've had the discussions before, and it's just like we've known each other for years and years and years. And that's why I love doing the show. That's why I love meeting people who overcome some dire circumstances you wouldn't think they could. But we want to start off from the beginning, because we talked about you have epilepsy, but that doesn't define you. But I have your book that you sent me. It's called Light in the Shadows, Life of Epilepsy. And it's a very riveting and heartbreaking and heartwarming story about your life. And when I found out that you, at a very young age, at age 2, you fell and had hit your head. Obviously you don't remember. You were way too young to remember the circumstances, I think. But based on what your parents have told you, can you tell what actually happened?
Yeah, so I have an older sister, so as it goes, playing outside, just outside front of my parents, and we was doing something, but I ended up falling over, hitting my head on the left side, and then within 2 weeks, I was experiencing seizures. I was looking like I was bending over to pick something up to begin with. Then I looked like I was going into a Superman pose. Then I was spacing out and just being not in the room. Then I got taken to the hospital, and they said, has he suffered any blows to the head within the last 2 weeks? And then it all came out going, okay, right, this is what we think's triggered his epilepsy. He hit his head on the left side, and I suffered damage to my left temporal lobe, which then caused me to have a lot of complex partial seizures and grand mal seizure and the rest of it. I've actually put down in my book, obviously, the medical notes straight out of it. So I figured that's a nice little touch, so people can really get a feel for, from the doctor's point of view, to obviously what my point of view is. I wanted to cover all bases, but ultimately it's first person experience.
How did your parents react when all this happened?
Oh, good question. A long time ago as well. Time ago.
Yeah.
But from what they explained to me when I was a toddler, heartbreak. Even as a child, just helpless. Like 101 questions, and not a single one can a medical professional answer, because they're questions they want to know, which only somebody with first-hand experience can answer. And it's one of those catch-22s, because back in 1995, that was pre-internet as well. So there was none of these support groups. There wasn't the research done there is now. Now they've able to identify all of these different types of seizures. But yeah, my parents were just upset, gutted. You know, every single time they heard something, it was just hitting a brick wall. It was just like, and the bit that broke them the most was when I was taking some of the top neurologists, arguably in the world, and it got to a point where they couldn't do anything for me. How horrible that is to like for my parents to hear from one of the top neurologists going, "There's nothing more we can do for your son. He will not lead a normal life. He will not play football. He will not, in the nicest possible way, amount to anything. He will not have a normal childhood." Um, and then by some miracle, after years and years and tweaking, lamotrigine managed to control me. But that's cutting it short. Everything which happened in between, which I'm sure we're going to cover.
Yeah, we'll cover that. But I've always discovered sometimes, when parents get told that there's nothing you can do for it, we can do for them, that their mindset is nuts to you, man. We are going to do something about it. Were they like that?
Exactly.
Was they
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that?
definitely. Yeah, we went from a local hospital where it was we can't do anything for him, we're going to have to refer him. They then referred me to a specialist hospital. Same thing. We've run out of resources. We can't do anything. Then they put me. Then we then got transferred over to the neurology specialist hospital, which even then they didn't know what to do. It was solely by accident they managed to come across being able to sort me out. And at the time, lamotrigine was also an adult-only drug. It hadn't been trialled on children yet, and the dose I was on to control me was I was on an adult's dose as a toddler, essentially. So the rule book got thrown out the window. It was what works. If it works, you just got to try something.
Now you said that you lost the sense of your right side, the use of your right side of your body. What age was that?
Yes. Whenever my epilepsy kicks in and I go uncontrolled, my body shuts down. So as a toddler, got to a point where my body just shut down because I was having so many seizures. Because we've calculated through my entire 28 years, I've had 8.5 years uncontrolled, completely uncontrolled in my life, on an average of 150 seizures a day. I've put 100 in my book, but that's when we stopped counting. They normally say keep a record, but normally they say just forgo keeping a record. You know, it's normally for like, have you had 1, 2, 3, 10, 20? When you're having over 100 a day, it's just put a book to one side. We just
How
need to fix you.
how exhausting is that? Because you know you're going to have them. I mean, back then you did, but I mean, you're going to have them. How exhausting is that?
If they're anything like they have been now being an adult, I can't describe how exhausting it is. I found that my body will either break or adapt, and I think because I was experiencing over 100 seizures a day as a toddler and right away through my childhood, essentially, I think my body's adapted to it, so it probably copes better than what most will. But as an adult, I compare it to probably about a constant 3-hour gym session going hard at it. Each one is like that, and it gets to a point where I can normally manage about 4 days, 5 days, and my body begins to shut down. We think it could just be a matter of my brain is going, you can't take this much punishment. We're going to have to try and shut a couple of those units down to try and, contain this.
What a
But
tough
that's
balance.
but that's the $1 million question. But every time, without fail, I my body just begins to shut down. I lose the ability to walk. I end up having to. I'll go from being standing up, fear, and the rest of it to literally needing a Zimmer frame. But throughout all of that, even when my body does shut down, I still get myself out of that hospital bed. I
Yeah.
still walk down that corridor, even though I collapse. I wasn't. They let me. There was one time as an adult, they let me go home. I was still having seizures. I was still collapsing, and I went out in the pouring rain and carried on my self-defense training. I was collapsing in the rain. I was having a seizure. I'd come out my seizure and I'd carry on, because through
Man.
me stopping, that's me letting my epilepsy win in my book. And my mentality is on another level. And half the stuff I
Obviously.
do,
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But this is what makes me me. Just because this is my fight doesn't mean, and this is how I deal with it, doesn't mean everybody has to. But that's my outlook on it. Yeah, it's exhausting, really exhausting. But the one thing throughout my history, doctors, neurologists, you name it, they've all been outstanding by my recovery. My recovery rate is just, one neurologist said my recovery rate is excellent. I can't say the word, but he just basically said it's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, because he goes, the human body shouldn't be taking that much punishment,
Mm-hmm.
which it shouldn't. It's
No.
not meant.
Now, I had a friend. He recently passed away a couple years ago, but he had narcolepsy, and
Yeah,
one of the things that he went through was if he started laughing uncontrollably,
yeah,
he could feel him just totally just losing it and collapsing, and he was conscious of what was going on, but he, I get him to laughing sometimes. So here it comes, and he keep laughing, and then all of a sudden he just collapse. Now with epilepsy, are there triggers that you see coming, or do you know it's coming, or just boom, it just hits you?
yeah. There's loads of people have different triggers. Mine, as I've got older, it's very much stress, being deprived of sleep. Those usual ones. I've never smoked, never drink, never do drugs, other than what's prescribed to me. So I really do try and stay on point with everything. But no, I always used to get this precursor or a warning for having one as a, can't really count it as a toddler, I suppose, but as a child, I used to see these horrible. Well, I used to see this man at the corner of my eye, like it was like a shadow, and I referred to him in the book actually. And um, doctors for ages thought he was a good sign because he'd pre-warned me before having a seizure. But then when I had my seizure, he became this absolute terrifying nightmare,
Mm.
which to this day, it's the only thing I fear. If you put him in a Halloween outfit and I saw him in a room, I don't know how I'd respond. Put me against anything else, happily. That, no, forget it.
Did they prescribed different drugs? You had a lot of different
uh,
anticonvulsant drugs. Did they help, or would the side effects really get to you?
no, I've been on lamotrigine for a number of years. There have been certain medications that they put me on as an adult, which I had really bad side effects to, really
Yeah.
bad. One was Keppra and one was Clobazam. Just a note for everybody, if you're watching this, do not stop taking that, but you can always ask your neurologist for a different medication.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I had a really bad experience with those. Lamotrigine, absolutely fine, but they have had me on lamotrigine since the age of 2, so my body's just grown with it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Do you get some people take medication for years. You kind of feel like they've lost its effectiveness, or does it work?
no, it works. It's controlling my seizures now, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Uh, Unfortunately, though, it's um, lamotrigine is the only drug that works on me. And
Yeah.
they tried so many different drugs back in 2019 as an adult. So all the recent drugs come out as well. None of them worked. They just escalated it and made me worse. But one thing that stayed consistent is lamotrigine. The only problem is that, as far as we're all concerned, that's the last offence. That's the only thing holding them at bay. Uh, which isn't nice to have that thought. I've had to go into a couple of my hospitals, and I've had to write up my own care plan.
Yeah.
I've had to go and tell them how to look after me.
Yeah.
And the only, in case this drug fails, that is that is awful. Um, that's why a
You know
couple
what?
of
I can see you actually have your files with you. Said here, instead of talk to me, look at my files. You'll know what to do. But,
yeah, exactly that. But no, that's not the case. It's right. How would you like us to treat you, sir?
yeah,
Right, okay. Let's try this, and this.
yeah,
Avoid this and this. You just feel, wow, it's mental.
yeah.
Um,
Now we talked about you know the effects of epilepsy and to your body and everything. But I want to start talking about you know people looking from the outside in, particularly when you were
yes.
a kid. You felt like you were treated. This is what you put in the book. You treated differently, and you're isolated by society. How'd you deal with that?
Try and find ways to cope with it. I mainly got isolated. I've been isolated throughout my whole time, loads of rejection. But if you're talking about the bullying aspect, I found different ways of coping. It's the social isolation bit I always struggled with, and I couldn't tell you how to get over that in schools. If you don't like that school, you want to stay away from it, but you have to go. So the way I dealt with that was I tried to find a hobby, tried to find a club outside of it, and people that didn't know I had epilepsy, and they helped me by accepting me ultimately. But no, you just do what you can in order to cope.
That's the one thing that I'm glad you said that because when I talk to kids about being bullied, I always suggest what you just said. If you're getting oppressed and people are insulting you and all these different things, find a different extracurricular activity to gain a new group of friends who don't know what your situation is, and they accept you for however way you are, and that's key. Thank you for bringing that up. Did you ever you've gone through so much in life? Did you ever ask why me, God?
No, no, I've got to be honest with you. I never hit that stage. I've always been always be positive. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. The way I look at it is, yes, I've been given quite a bad hand, and it did start off for many years as a curse, but I now see it more as a blessing. Uh, the way I look at it is, I'm glad it happened to me because it happened to me. It could have happened to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and for that, I'm happy to take that hit. No, I've always been brought up around like God and religion, and people find different ways to cope. Mine was just very much like, and they say he never gives you more than you can handle. Uh, no, I never looked at that avenue. I just looked at it like, come on. I was always brought up with a bit of a tough shoulder. So, come on, you'll be fine. You'll get through it. You got through it before. You're
Yeah.
not new to it. Different challenges, different days. I'll just go head first, go into it, and not give it a thought. The hardest bit was waking up every morning and going to school. That really was.
Yeah, and we'll get to that part of it. But I want to talk about your siblings. And a lot of times when a family member goes through, particularly in your case with your epilepsy, did they ever feel like they were being cheated for affection?
Yes and no, because this is a delicate subject. Because
Right.
you could say, his parents neglected the daughter, and that's not the case. It's like any parent would do the same. If one's fit and healthy, you have to focus more attention on the one that's ill. So yes, in the book, she's put her own words in it from first-hand experience of hers. And yeah, she got robbed of a lot of her time. She doesn't have the connection she would have liked to with her mum and dad, but she hat off to her, honestly. Like
Right.
I just ride the wave, so to speak. But when I read my sister's bit, that's what really made me go, whoa. It was just really like, it was heartbreaking. I might think that at the age of 8, 9, she was making her own food. She was doing her own shepherd pie. If I had a seizure at kind of like when she was 5, she'd have to go knock next door. She'd go get the keys, unlock the car, get everything prepared. She then run ahead in the child's ward because we'd have an open pass, so we'd just run straight in and be given a bed.
Special sister.
Yeah, like, and then through school, she's for years I've always gone, you're so overprotective, and years I've always said that to her, like, back off. And then I read that within the last year of when she wrote it, and oh wow, that's all I can say.
All right. Well,
to it.
speaking of that, and with your permission, I want to read what your sister wrote at the beginning of the book, and then, folks, I'm going to try to get through this. I really am, but I'm going to read it because every time I read it, I cry. I'm not going to try. I'm trying to hold it in here. So this is what his sister wrote. I cannot, in a few words, describe 20 years of being a sibling with an epileptic brother. That is hard, so hard to write. Tears running down my face, the flashbacks, the pain. No words will ever help you understand how I feel or felt, but I hope this helps you. Now, again, this is her writing to him, to James. The physiological damage, the heartbreak and separation anxiety that I have suffered. This is nothing to what he goes through, yet it still has massive implications on those close by. Imagine being a toddler having a newborn baby brother appear, having cuddles and playing until he's about 18 months old. Later, you don't see your friend anymore, and he disappears with your mom and your dad. Dad is juggling you, his wife and son, and work. Imagine you, a little 3-year-old at that time, being passed around from close family members to neighbors while your parents try to help stabilize and get a diagnosis for your tiny brother. That part of you, your sibling, who you love and want to play with and grow old with from the second they're born. Your father works, your mom is with your brother. The separation anxiety and feeling of rejection because you are too young to understand what's going on. It doesn't go away. I don't have the relationship I want with my mom and never will. It's just that time in life that was missed. It made me grow up too fast and made me too mature, scared, and needy. The fear of rejection from a parent, the fears of hospitals and doctors and seeing how things are done, and the panic. I cannot go into a hospital, dentist, or a doctor's surgery alone without flashbacks and fears. Seeing the panic in doctors and nurses, all the equipment, but being too young to know why and what it's all about. And this is what James is talking about. From a young age, I knew my role from being at home to school, knowing what you have to do and when wasn't always enough. Go knock next door, lock the car, open the doors, lock the front door, run ahead to the children's ward and press the door button. All these things I knew from a young age. Trying to remember the highs of the lows, but being the sister I am, I make the most of it. The nicknames he has, Hulk, Captain, Mr. Rogers, he was my superhero. But every name has a different meaning to us than what they mean to others. I knew I couldn't get through this. The inner strength I show to hide my fear. And emotion isn't something I can use day after day. It's an adrenaline that kicks in when he goes weak. He goes weak, but in Hulk mode. I go in my superhero zone to put up a tough shell, knowing I'll break when I can. But for me, it's about being the face and voice he sees and hears when he comes back from hospital or out of a seizure. I say to him, 3, 2, 1, back in the room. For those who know, that's from Little Britain. It's about the time and the place. Crack a joke. Be silly. Make them smile. My goodness, the things I've done to make him smile. Getting eaten by his toys. Pretending the bed's a robot. Pretending the oxygen machine changes my voice. Getting in bed with him. Just to let him feel safe and sound. Cozy, and so he would sleep. Knowing if Hulk comes during a seizure, I'll probably get broken. Usually I do. I'm surprised he hasn't broken every part of me. But he is my brother, and as long as I have my brother, I always have a best friend. Life goes on. Months and years pass, and he has good news and bad, which affect us all. At 8 years old, knowing how to deal with and help my brother for the times we were together at school, when we had to live it out of the hospital, when Mom mom and dad wasn't about. It was in me to be with him. At school, diazepam in the reception office, me being pulled out of class when he's having them. On the floor, any area to be that face and voice he hears, knowing what to do and when, shouting to people, leave him, don't move him, protect him. Yet he only knows his sister as a source of trust and security, someone who he knows he is safe with. So I'm at school, always and forever his guard. He may be bigger and stronger than me now, but I've always got Hulk's back. Through school, it was always hard. He got bullied. Primary school wasn't so bad. It was more being for him, there for him when Hulk mode came. Keep Hulk calm to bring him around slowly. In school, his life struggles were more about him and his self-frustration being so far behind. His medication slowed him down. His writing, his reading, he would just hate it and get frustrated. We get older, his hormones change, schools change. But I remember being at big school, secondary school. I'd been there a few years and he joined. Little bro in his oversized blazer, tie as long as his shirt, all smart. Rucksack full of his new kit, which we all know we never need. I knew my life was about to get tough again, having my own school life and having to look after and be there for him. Kids are nasty. Teachers don't care, so siblings who protect. Walking around, the nasty kids used to push him around, call him names, copy his seizures. Luckily, whilst I was there, I had his back to beat those kids up. I'm not a rough or nasty person, but you upset or hurt my brother, I'll beat your butt. To keep him safe, he was part of my friendship group. My best mate had my back, so I had no worries about having his. We spent time helping build his strength and protecting him, hanging out in our form room, which was a science lab, using our perfect badges to get our food first and without queuing. They had my back so I could have mine and my brother's back. There were times when I got called out of class. The big seizures came when his hormones changed, reaching his teens. But I was there. English GCSE exams, getting called out by my teacher, thinking that's thanks, bro. Perfect timing. He knows I hate exams. I get down to see them trying to move him into the medical room. I shouted, stop! What are you doing? Get out! Knowing him and knowing him there, I'm there. I kept him safe, talking to him and just following his every move. Holding my tears and showing my superpower strength. Mom's always said I'm too vocal. I say too much. But for the reason for this is protection, to be heard. People never listen. Every time we have been in and out of hospital, whether it's been me taking him in or them, people don't listen. Know your sibling, trust your instinct, and protect at all costs. Even though my brother is taller than me, stronger and more muscular, he'll always be my little brother. I never call him by his name. His nicknames are Fat Boy, Hulk, Rogers, all of which to us have other meanings. But no matter what, no one knows you or your siblings like you do, and no one can tell you how stuff like this affects the siblings. I am the strongest person on the outside. And hold back the emotions, but when I see help and the cavalry arriving in terms of the parents, I am like a melt in the middle pudding. Tears come out and don't stop. I got through it.
Well done. It's does yeah, it's heartbreaking.
I'm so glad she was able to do that, James. It's important to know that your siblings have your back.
It took her time. Well, she went through the exact same motion as what I did when I was right. She had to relive every single time. Essentially, she had to relive the entire events in order to put that down in words.
How did you mentioned it and she mentioned it about the other children? How did they treat you at different ages?
Say that again?
How did they treat you, the kids? Can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you. Just missed that bit.
At different ages, how did the kids treat you?
There's never been a nice, easy time for me and other kids. The thing is, even when I kids were nasty to me. I can't possibly sugarcoat it and say I had a good day at school. My best and most secure days was when my sister was there. But obviously, she's older than me, so inevitably, as she grows older, she leaves, and then I'm at school by myself. They'd mimic my seizures, call me things like epileptic freak, keeping it tame. Um, they'd push me, they'd shove me. I've in my older years, they'd blackmail me, and even when my seizures were controlled and I wasn't collapsing to the floor, um, I'd still get picked on. It was no different from if I had something physically, like an arm missing, for example. It was no different because, in fact, it made it worse because on the outside I looked normal, and even then, on my good days, they'd still pick on me. So throughout my whole life, I've always been reminded that I have epilepsy and it doesn't go away. But no, kids were nasty to me, but I've always ended up, yeah.
Yeah, stronger. Now, it was what's interesting is you were able to get an insight on what it's like for just bullying in essence of bullying. You wrote an article about that. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the article is victim to victor, how to deal with bullying, and essentially there's a good chunk about bullying, the psychology behind bullies, what I'd recommend to do in my book, which uses quite some nice metaphors. But in my article, it's mainly about I explain how I dealt with it and how to get past it, and if anything, how to prevent it from happening in the first place. I really put into the article what I wanted, like people to know, and I believe it was with Reader's Digest actually. But I put in there about prepare your kids to get bullied because the thing is, and by this I mean enroll them into doing self-defense, get them to work on being having a voice, so not screaming but being firm, raising your voice, speaking with authority, because the thing is, if you scream, it's like you're scared. If you shout and speak with authority and you raise your voice, it draws attention, and it also can make them stand back a little bit because it's like, whoa, okay, he's fighting back. Um, then I speak about the physical side of things. So, depending on their age, I recommend different forms of self-defense. And then again, it's that built on tiers. So you start with the verbal side, and then if the verbal side doesn't work, then you feel confident enough on the physical side of things if things get physical. Then you've got the whole and that ultimately does cover most of the spectrum what people experience as far as bullying is concerned. Cyberbullying, I explain in there. There's I don't find cyberbullying as hard to deal with as being in a classroom with bullies,
Hmm.
because you're sitting at home behind a screen and you've got this magic button which is block, report, vanish,
Yeah.
and it's great. I wish I had something like that in the school. If I had a rubber, like a human-sized rubber that I could like erase them with, that
Yeah.
would be fantastic. But one doesn't exist. So the physical and the verbal side is quite easy to get rid of, actually. And it's funny, names always used to really get to me. And then I had this one self-defense instructor turn around, an epileptic freak always used to be one of them. And long story short, he turned around to me and I turned around to my parents and go, I got called an epileptic freak. And they'd go, you're not one of those, we all do it. Like, oh, don't take them too seriously. You're absolutely fine. He didn't do that with me. He went, what's wrong? And I went, they called me an epileptic freak. He didn't say, you're not. He went, well, are you? Are you an epileptic freak? And he left me puzzled. And he just went, when you can answer that, then it will no longer affect you. And it's so true because now words
Yeah.
don't affect me. Like I've worked security, I do my self defense with my clients, and you can call me any name under the sun, and it will not bother me because he went, as soon as you know in your heart it's not true, it will not even upset you. Because he went, even if you say it's not true and you cry and you get upset, it still has an effect on you.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you treat it as just a word, it makes no difference.
Yeah, I think that's key because a lot of people, they take it to heart. And they know it's not true. They know it's not true about themselves, but they think that because someone said it's got to be true.
Yeah, but deep down in the back of their mind, even if they don't want to admit it or they don't think about it, they know it's true. It's like, I would take as much offense to somebody calling me a table as I would to somebody calling me an epileptic freak now. It makes no difference. It's just a word to me. And that's the key bit, which I'd prepare people from a verbal point of view to get used to, but also using their tone of voice. And I encourage them to work with maybe not your parents because it can be quite awkward, but because the medication I was on, it slowed my brain down a substantial amount with the dose I was on. I was too slow to think of comebacks. Work on comebacks, with like your parents and maybe your uncle or even your sister. I worked on it with my sister, but I was still too slow. That's what the article's about. Ultimately, it gives a more of an insight into my experience with bullying, what I've learned over the years, what I teach a couple of my students. And the book explains more the psychology behind it and what I personally went through.
Now, one of the things that I forgot to ask you about this because when you have your seizures, particularly when you were a kid, did you lose consciousness a lot or not?
Occasionally, I did, yes, but it's very hard to pinpoint if that's I lost consciousness or I was hallucinating. Because the big problems I had was I would hallucinate simultaneously as having a seizure. So what would occasionally happen is I'd have a seizure, I'd collapse to the floor, I'd shake, and while this is going on, I'd hallucinate. And then even when I stopped having a seizure, I'd carry on my hallucination. So I would still be mass panicking and terrified and curling up and trying to claw my way to the edge of the bed. And then I'd go into another seizure. And it's just a loop. But no, I have been unconscious in the past with seizures.
Now, with the hallucinations, what's that like? I mean, what are you thinking about when you're going through this?
As a child, mine was it's this shadow man who was supposedly a guardian who warned me of my seizures. I'd normally at this point end up in a hospital anyway, and I'd be sitting in the hospital. I'd have my seizure, and he'd go and the setting would still be there. I know my parents were there. I know the nurses are there. I know everyone's there. I know the setting. I've been there more than enough times. But he'd go from being a nice comfort blanket, which everybody's made him out to be, to growing claws. His eyes would go red. It'd go more like a shadow rather than a black coat. He'd start climbing around a wall, scaling up and down. While all of this is going on, I'm having seizures as well. Remember that part? And then he'd start attacking my family, and then he'd start getting closer and closer. And having things like that happen to you at such a young age is the only thing I fear in this world.
Oh, that's like a movie. I can actually vision that. I mean, for me not to go through this, I mean, I can't imagine what you went through.
I'm about 10 when I'm having stuff like that happen to me, and it's continuous. So turns out it was an effect of a medication they had me on. But when you get that pounded into you enough times, you forget about, like, seizures seem like a walk in the park after you get traumatized by something like that. My parents actually say that's been a blessing and a curse, because unfortunately it's the only thing you fear. So I'll do my self-defense, I'll do white water rafting, I'll climb mountains, no fear whatsoever.
Isn't that crazy? That's crazy.
But if you reenacted and you put somebody like that in a room with me, who knows how I'd respond? I wouldn't be comfortable. I can tell you that much.
Now, I was thinking that, for what you've gone through in your life, I can imagine, because I remember what it was like for me to growing up. idolize certain kids all the time
Yeah.
for different reasons, But in your situation, because you've gone through so much with the seizures and everything, did you find yourself comparing yourself to others just to deal with those insecurities?
Uh, yeah, for me, it started. I felt normal up until I joined school, primary school. That is, as soon as you join primary school, um, as, so, as soon as you join primary school, you start to compare yourself to other children in the room because you go from just being you and your sibling to you and 100 different kids.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you start to compare, and then that's when you start to feel stupid, silly. You realise you're not as fit as them, as quick as them. That's where the insecurities start. That's when you notice you're different. Whether that be a good thing or a bad thing.
When did you grow out of that, or have you?
Grown out of my insecurities.
No, no, not everyone's got insecurities, but I mean
All
comparing
right.
yourself to others.
Oh yeah, I grew out of that. I don't. I don't compare myself to others. I just be the best I can be. I had a role model growing up, which was Andy from my Warhammer shop. But sorry, I went to the Warhammer shop. Um, but yeah, other than that, I don't compare myself to anybody. I just do what I do in life. The great thing having little to no prospects in life is you you don't care about money. You know you're not going to have money. You know you're not probably not going to have a decent job because obviously you're so limited on what you can and can't do. The only thing I have and ever had was my name, my reputation. So I don't care what people think of me, but what I do is I always try and do the right thing. And as long as I know I'm doing the right thing and my heart's in it, I don't need to worry. I don't need to concern myself with. I concern myself with the opinions of others throughout all of school. The whole years of being bullied every day. It's like the good old saying: a lion doesn't concern itself with the opinions of sheep.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
Uh,
brilliant. I like that.
but I still act in a nice manner, and I still value other people's opinions on me. As you should. You shouldn't go through life just going, oh, I don't really care. Uh,
Well, James, it looks like this particular show, we covered a lot of stuff, but we've got so much more to go. This is why I wanted to do two shows, right? Because, I mean, we've got
yeah,
because we've talked about your journey up until this point, but the biggest thing is I want to make sure that we show people in the next show that your journey is just beginning, and the journey is a victorious journey and all the things you've accomplished and things like that. But we will start talking about that on the very next show. And I'm sorry that I broke down crying with reading your sister's section. It was just
don't. It's perfectly natural. It's really a book that's been written with the heart and not the
yeah,
head.
yeah. And again, if anybody wants to get James's book, it's Light in the Shadows: Life of Epilepsy, and that's the beginning. His sister's thing is at the beginning of the book, and it gets that much better as you read it. So, as we end this show, I want everyone to smile infectiously, laugh genuinely, love unconditionally, live courageously. And I have always lived by those principles, and I'm glad I brought it up. And I think James, you've epitomized that. You've lived that. You're living that now, and I appreciate you coming on my show. And
Oh, thank you for having me.
the next show is going to be that much better. So I believe in every one of you. I believe you're destined for greatness, but you have to work at it. You have to make that decision that you cannot live a life of mediocrity, and you have to do something rather than wait for something to happen. You got to make it happen. So as we end the show, I want everyone. I'm inviting everyone to come back to my next show next week with James.
Thank you.